It seems that almost any worksheet that has a chart on it, the time arises when you need to move the chart or reshape it. Now we can move a chart simply by pointing either to any of the borders, and nothing wrong with that, but often it's going to be easier to move a chart if you point just inside the upper border. That's in what we call the chart area. If you just happen to click in the middle of the chart and start to drag, you're really moving the plot area, like I did here. I really didn't want to do that, Control Z. So you want to get in the habit of, I think most of the time, drag in the upper right or upper left where you see that white space, and you'll see the term chart area. Click and drag, you move this where you want. By the way, to make this stand out a little more prominently, I'm going to go to the Design tab here and just choose one with a black background. We can see that a little bit better. And here's a chart below this. I want to move that as well too. I'll point to its chart area, move it around that way. So nothing too fancy or difficult about doing that. But when we resize a chart, sometimes different thoughts come into mind. First of all, anytime when you click a chart, 8 handles become visible, one on each of the 4 corners and one at the midpoints of the 4 sides. Now, I can make this chart not as tall by pointing to the button on top, the fill handle, one of the 8 fill handles, drag it down like that possibly, drag it up, do the same thing on the bottom, of course, do the same thing here, and we can also do this from the corner. And as we're doing this, we can also make it wider, taller, and just do almost anything we want in terms of sizing. But at certain points, that sizing has some implications. There's a certain look to this, and if we were to make it shorter this way, it looks different, not just because it's not as tall, but the way the columns are being displayed maybe isn't as good. So sometimes what we say is, let's keep the general look of this the same, but make it smaller or larger. If you drag one of the corner handles, as we saw earlier, you can make it go almost any way you want. But if you hold down the Shift key, you're making this bigger or smaller and keeping the same ratio of height to width. This is often referred to as the aspect ratio. So we're maybe making it a little bit bigger. Now, when you're holding down a key and using the fill handle, be sure to let go of the mouse first to keep that redesign in place. Maybe I'll make it larger from the lower left corner. I've got the Shift key held down because I want to keep that same aspect ratio. Like that maybe. So sometimes that's necessary. Less necessary but occasionally useful is you want to resize a chart around its center, which we don't really see or know exactly where it is. But if we point to one of the side handles and hold down the Control key, as I'm dragging inward from the right, notice that the left side is coming inward at the same rate. We're keeping the same center but making it not as wide. I don't think that's terribly important. You don't need that often. Same thing would happen if we point to the upper arrow here and hold down the Control key as we drag this way. You see what's happening. Another need that arises, though, is the idea that you want to make this all look a little bit neater. And so as you move the chart around, perhaps you're saying, I'd like those edges of the chart to line up perfectly with the cell boundaries in the background. I'm about to drag this corner here, and I can drag it anywhere I want. But if I hold down the Alt key, it's as if it's got a magnetic attraction to those grid lines in the background. And I like that look right there, so I'll let go of the mouse first. And maybe in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. Move this around. Remember, I can go anywhere I want, but if I'm holding down the Alt key, it's going to automatically line up with cell boundaries in the background. So I'll let go of the mouse first and then click outside of it. So it's just perfect that way. And maybe I'll do the same thing over here. It works best by doing it from the corners, but you can do this from the sides as well. When you do this from the corners, you're taking care of 2 sides at once. So again, I think you can see how this isn't completely necessary most of the time, but it just has a slightly neater look to everything, and sometimes you want that appearance. So holding down the Alt key allows you to align the edges of a chart with the cell boundaries just perfectly. Here, I'll just do the bottom edge this way. There we go. And we could do that with the other chart as well. So we can move these around simply by dragging. We can also copy a chart. I want this chart duplicated. I'll press Control D, D for duplicate. It's duplicated. And as we saw in an earlier movie, possibly we'll change the orientation of this, or maybe just have it show less data. Maybe we'll just have it show domestic only here. So we've got different reasons for wanting to duplicate charts. We can do that easily with Control D. You can also do this by dragging a chart with the Control key held down. I'm dragging this down here with the Control key held down. I'm letting go of the mouse. We can also do that. So different techniques for moving charts, copying charts, duplicating charts, and resizing charts. Remember, using the Shift key allows us to By dragging corners, keep the same aspect ratio. That's a ratio of height to width. And by using the Alt key, we can line up the edges of the chart with cell boundaries in the background.